Thanks for joining us on The World Today. I am Amarachi Ubani. Our focus today is on the situation in Burkina Faso, where the military government has indicated it has no plans to remain in power and is even willing to hand over to a transitional government. That decision was arrived at during a meeting between the military and opposition leaders in the Burkina Faso capital, Ouagadougou, on Sunday evening. The military have been in charge of the government since President Blaise Compaoré resigned, abandoning plans to extend his 27-year rule.
The military takeover happened only shortly after Blaise Compaoré stepped down. His move was so sudden there was not enough time to decide on a transition government. But by Saturday, a new leader had been announced in person of Lieutenant Colonel Isaac Zida as leader of a transitional government.
Ils promettent au peuple burkinabé tout entier de tenir leur engagement.
In his address, Lieutenant Colonel Zida said the military was not interested in power, but were working for the greater interest of the nation. Protests which erupted last week over Mr. Compaoré's plan to extend his 27-year rule, causing him to resign. When the military took over, they became more intense. Many called on the government to leave the public scene immediately, as their role is to safeguard the country's national integrity. Others insisted the biggest democracy in the world are governed by civilians, not by soldiers. On Sunday, protesters made their way to the state television headquarters. They said they were there to find out what was going on. They were being addressed by a colonel when gunshots rang out. Protesters dispersed, running for cover. By Sunday evening, a relative calm had emerged. The military said it had dispersed protesters to restore order, and key opposition figures met with Colonel Zida for talks. Under Burkina Faso's constitution, the head of the National Assembly takes over if the president resigns, with a mandate to organize elections within 90 days. However, the army has dissolved the legislature and suspended the constitution.
Let's talk more about what's going on in Burkina Faso. The VOA's Anne Luke joins me now. She's in Dakar, Senegal. Anne, great to see you. Thank you for joining us on The World Today. Let's talk about that agreement between the military and members of the opposition, the new plan to transit power, or to hand over power, beg your pardon, to a transitional government. What more do we know about this deal?
Yeah, there hasn't exactly been a deal just yet. They're in, they can.
We do seem to be having trouble hearing Anne there. We'll try to reconnect with her and get more on the story. But in the meantime, a boat carrying migrants off the north coast of Istanbul has capsized, killing about 24 people. The nationality of the migrants have not yet been confirmed, but authorities believe that they were trying to get to Romania, Turkey being one of the main departure points for migrants who have made EU countries their destination. The recent accident took place where the Bosphorus meets the Black Sea. Usually migrant boats are not built to last and are very often overcrowded, though they pay huge amounts of money, that's the migrants themselves, to smugglers to get on board. Rescue operations have begun for any survivors of the accident, with the 7 Coast Guard vessels and a helicopter joining in the search. Overcrowding combined with bad weather are deemed responsible for the boat capsizing. The daily ceremony at the India-Pakistani border of Wagah went ahead today, despite speculations of it being suspended following a suicide attack there on Sunday. The Wagah crossing is a high-profile target, with large crowds gathering every day to watch an elaborate and colorful flag-lowering ceremony as the border closes. Witnesses to the blast yesterday say it was a horrific scene following the blast. Politicians on both sides of the border have condemned the attack. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called it a dastardly act of terrorism. India has in the past accused Pakistan of sponsoring jihadist groups in the region, and the two countries, which have fought 3 wars against each other since independence from Britain in 1947, have been engaged in a long-running conflict over the region of Kashmir, and both sides claim to have a stake in. We have reconnected with Anne, and we'll be talking to her in just a minute. Hi, Anne. Great to see you. Let's talk about again what more we know about this agreement between the Burkina Faso military and the opposition as it concerns a transitional government.
Yeah, it wasn't quite an agreement. It was more like a beginning of dialogue. The military says that they are going to establish a form of unity government, a so-called transitional body that's going to take the government to the country to elections. So really, we're seeing the beginning of talks that have begun, that have continued today in Ouagadougou to form this government and figure out how the military is going to step back and the civilians are to step.
That's quite interesting, Anne, because I know when Lieutenant Colonel Isaac Zida was announced the new military leader as of Saturday, he said the army was not interested in power, that they wanted to hand over power. So it makes you wonder really what the protest was about when the military took over as of Friday. I don't know if you can hear me, Anne, but we're talking about the protests that resulted after President Blaise Compaoré resigned on Friday and the military took over, seeing that Lieutenant Colonel Isaac Zida said that we do seem to really have lost Anne this time. We'll try to reconnect with her, perhaps third time will be a charm. Now, the daily ceremony, we've talked about that already, but intense fighting does continue in Syria. Today, ISIS militants boast that they have overtaken a gas field in the central province of Homs. And this makes it the second gas field that they have seized in weeks, following fighting between coalition forces and the militants. Pictures posted online showed ISIS flags raised in Jarha gas field, as well as seized vehicles and weaponry. Islamic State fighters who now hold up to a third of Syria, as well as swathes of Iraq, have declared a caliphate on the territories that they control. They took the larger Sha'ar gas field on October 30. U.S. investigators have concluded that a safety device on the Virgin Galactic spacecraft that crashed on Friday and killed a test pilot in the process had been deployed early. This was explained by Virgin Air's safety chief, Christopher Hart. He said the feathering device that was designed to slow the aircraft on re-entry activated without a command from the pilots. Now, although British media had reported the fuel tanks and engine had been faulty, Mr. Hart refuted the speculations. Virgin boss Sir Richard Branson has accused some print media of publishing wild accusations over the crash. He's, however, put a pause on plans to send tourists into space until he and his family have made the trip, though he's considered the accident a horrible setback.
Of course, is to influence this policy for positive change, and I would like to see all Americans have access to the same healthcare rights. But beyond that public policy goal, my goals really are quite simple, and they mostly do boil down to me, my family and friends, and making sure they all know how important they are to me and how much I love them.
It sounds so cliche, we take things one day at a time, but that's the only way to get through this. You take away all of the material stuff, all the nonsense that we all seem to latch onto as a society.
I do apologize for all the mix-up there. We'll take a break now on The World Today. When we come back, that ceasefire agreement between the Nigerian military and Boko Haram seems to have broken down, and more attacks have been reported in the northeastern parts of the country. We'll have one analyst's take on what's going on. Please join us again.